Today, we're diving into one of humanity's biggest mysteries. What are the real biological secrets to living an exceptionally long life? For centuries, we've all kind of wondered, is hitting that 100-year milestone just a roll of the genetic dice? Or are there actual clues hidden deep inside our bodies that can tell us who's going to get there? And this isn't just some abstract question. It's becoming more important every single day. The number of centenarians is exploding. We're not just talking about a few outliers anymore. This is a full-blown global phenomenon. So, to crack this case, researchers have had to become basically biological detectives. They're digging into the past, looking for clues in a really specific place: old blood samples. The idea is to see if biological data from decades ago can actually predict who lives the longest. And that brings us to a huge study out of Sweden, and to this number, 1,224. Out of more than 44,000 people they tracked, that's how many made it to their 100th birthday. Their blood, their biology, that's where the secrets are. The sheer scale of this whole thing is just wow. I mean, think about it. They started collecting these blood samples way back in the 80s and 90s. And then they followed these people for up to 35 years. It's that incredibly long-term view that makes what they found so powerful. So, what did these biological detectives find? Well, let's start with the clues that were hiding in plain sight, the kind of stuff you'd see in a totally standard blood test. So when they crunched the numbers, the patterns were actually remarkably clear. People who eventually lived to be 100 tended to have lower levels of things like glucose, uric acid, and creatinine, decades earlier. But here's the real surprise. It's what they had more of: higher levels of iron and, get this, higher total cholesterol. And this cholesterol finding, it really flips what we think we know on its head, right? For years, all we've heard is lower cholesterol, lower cholesterol. But this study suggests that for the very oldest people, the rulebook might be totally different. Something that's seen as a risk factor in your 50s might actually be a good thing for surviving into extreme old age. And here's the crucial takeaway from the researchers themselves. They believe these patterns, which you can see decades before death, aren't just random chance. They point to a mix of our genes and our lifestyle choices, things we might actually be able to change. It's a huge hint that our lifespan isn't just pre-programmed from birth. Okay, so this is a really fascinating start, but it kind of begs an even bigger question. If a simple blood test can tell us all of this, what could we find out if we looked even deeper? I mean, what if we've been missing a whole universe of information? So let's go to the next phase of this investigation. We're going way beyond the dozen or so things a standard test looks at, and we're diving into the thousands of molecules that make up something called the metabolome. So what on earth are metabolites? Well, you can think of them as the real-time evidence of your body doing its job. They're the tiny little end products of, well, everything, from the food you just ate to the way your cells are making energy. They're basically the chemical fingerprints of your life in motion. And the difference in the level of detail here is just staggering. It's like a standard blood test is a rough pencil sketch of your health. But analyzing the metabolome, that's like getting a high-resolution, full-color 3D fingerprint of every single thing your body is doing right this second. And by studying these incredibly detailed fingerprints, scientists are starting to see that longevity isn't about finding one fountain of youth molecule. No, it's about the unique patterns, the signatures that thousands of them create when they work together. Now, I know this slide might look like a crazy spider web, but stick with me because it's an amazing picture of what we're talking about. Every one of those little dots is a metabolite, and the lines show how they're all connected. You can literally see how they form these dense networks, these unique metabolic fingerprints that look different in people who live to 100 versus those who don't. And when you zoom in on these fingerprints, you start finding some really cool specific clues. You see molecules like ergothioneine, an antioxidant you get from food, which some people are now calling a potential longevity vitamin. You also see clues coming straight from our gut bacteria, with their unique byproducts showing up at higher levels in the long-lived. Now, if these fingerprints are a perfect, real-time picture of your health, it leads to a pretty wild idea. What if you could use them to tell time? Not the time on a calendar, but your body's biological time. Well, that's exactly what scientists can now do. They call it a metabolic clock. So what is metabolic age? It's a measurement of how old your body acts based on its internal chemistry. So you could be 50 years old on your driver's license, but your body could have the metabolic age of a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old, and that number, it might be way more important for your health than how many birthdays you've celebrated. Okay, we've gone from a simple blood test all the way to this futuristic-sounding metabolic clock. So the really big question is, what does all of this actually mean for us right now? Well, the number one takeaway is that there's no single magic bullet for living a long life. It's not one supplement, it's not one gene, it's this incredibly complex symphony of thousands of factors, a state of metabolic balance. And the score for that symphony is written in our blood. So let's just boil it all down. First, your body is sending out signals about where it's headed decades in advance. Second, we have to be willing to challenge old ideas, because some things, like cholesterol, might work very differently than we thought. And finally, and this is the most hopeful part, a lot of these metabolic signatures are not set in stone. They're tied to things we can actually change, like our diet and our gut health. Which leaves us with one last and pretty profound question. As this science gets better and better, we might soon have the ability to get a really clear picture of our own potential for a long life. So if your blood really does hold the secrets to how long you might live, would you want to know?